And this is where human design really started to blow my mind. And I know I probably say that about a lot of things of human design, but it really helped me to understand myself and other people. So today I'm going to talk about the centers, the different types of centers, and I'm going to go through a brief rundown of what all the centers are. I'll try not to talk too much because I could probably talk about each center for like an hour, but I'll do my best to keep it brief while giving you a decent understanding of what all of the centers do. If you're loving learning about human design, it would mean so much to me if you would subscribe to my channel. My purpose in human design literally is to share resources with my community. So I'd love for you to join my community by subscribing, and I'll continue to share. Okay, so new on my human design journey, I was Googling things like, what are these shapes? So if you haven't figured out by now, these shapes on the chart are called centers. There are 9 of them, as you can see, and most human design charts will have some combination of colored in or white shapes. When the shapes are colored in, we say that they're defined, and when they're white, they're either open or undefined. An open center means that there are no gate activations, so the little lines that are coming off the center, those are gates. If there's none of those, it's open, and if there are a couple of those but there's not a channel, then it will be undefined. There is a bit of a difference between an open center and an undefined center, but for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to go into those, and I'll probably use the terms open and undefined interchangeably, even though they're not the exact same thing. And what creates definition, which I sort of alluded to, is when 2 centers are connected through a channel. That's what makes something defined. So you can't have a center defined if it isn't connected to another center. Like I said earlier, most people have a combination of defined and undefined centers. If you are a reflector, you have no centers defined, and some people, although not very common, do have all 9 centers defined. As far as I've been taught, the colors in the human design chart don't mean anything, in the sense that if you have the sacral center defined, it's always going to be red. So don't worry about why the colors are the way that they are. If it's defined, those are the colors they're going to be, and if it's not defined, it's going to be white. So it's more important to notice if it is white or not white, rather than what the specific colors are. And if you've been taught differently, I would love to know, so let me know in the comments. Defined centers, the ones that are colored in, those are said to be where we have more consistent sources of energy. And if you don't totally resonate with that right off the bat, don't worry. While we definitely do have more consistent access to energy in the defined centers, you still can have conditioning and different ways of experiencing it, but it will be more consistent than your open centers. Not only do you have consistent energy, but you also radiate energy from your defined centers. Your undefined or open centers are the opposite. So you actually take in or receive and then amplify the energy and make it bigger. Because they're not defined in your chart, you have inconsistent access to this energy. So sometimes you can actually seem like you have more of this energy than someone who has it defined because you amplify it and make it bigger, but for short periods of time. And you generally will only have that when you're around those people with the defined energy centers. You can also become a little bit dependent on someone else's energy if you're used to having them around. So maybe it's someone that you live with or someone that you work with, 40 plus hours a week. So it can be helpful to get to know the charts of the people you spend the most time with and see where your centers kind of overlap and where they're different. Because where you have an open center and they have a defined center, you're probably to a degree, you get used to that energy and you can sometimes rely on it. So it's good to understand what energy is yours and what energy belongs to other people that you're just borrowing from time to time. So there are 5 types of energy centers. There's one center for manifestation, which is the throat. There are 2 pressure centers, which are at the top and the bottom of the chart, the head and the crown. There are 4 motors, which are your sacral, your emotional solar plexus, your root, and your heart center. There are 3 awareness centers, which are your ajna or mind, your spleen, and your emotional solar plexus. And there's 1 center for identity, which is your G or self center. Looking at the chart, kind of from top to bottom, I'll put a graphic up here somewhere so you can follow along. You have at the very top the crown or the head, then there's the mind or the ajna, the throat, the G, the heart, sometimes it's also called the will center or the ego, the emotional solar plexus, the spleen, the sacral, and the root. So if you're familiar at all with chakras, that's where these energy centers are based off of. It said in the 1700s, I forgot the exact year, we went from being a 7-centered being, which is the chakra system, into the 9-centered being. So if you're looking at the chart, it's like the heart chakra split into the G center and the heart, and the solar plexus split into the spleen and the emotional solar plexus. Centers are often where our conditioning shows the most in human design. And I mentioned before, we can be conditioned both in our undefined and our defined centers, but it's a lot more likely to show up in the undefined center. Usually when it's undefined or open, our conditioning is something like, I'm not enough of that, or like I should be more this way. And usually when you have conditioning in a defined center, it's I'm too much of this. So for example, in the emotional center, if you have it defined, in my experience anyways, what the conditioning used to look like for me is I'm too emotional. Whereas the ajna, or the mind, for example, I have it open and it was I don't have enough certainty. And so I'm going to go through the themes for each of the centers, but that gives you an idea of how the conditioning can show up. So keep an eye out, ear out, whatever, while we're going through this to see what themes you might relate to for your centers. I could talk at length about all of these centers, but I'm going to try and keep it brief and just in one video and go through all the centers for you. Ready? The head, or the crown. The head is the center for ideas and inspiration. It is meant to be filled with questions, not answers. Most people have this center open, and I really want to point out that inspiration and ideas are not meant to be figured out. It's about engaging in possibility, asking questions, and letting the answers sort of like come to you from the universe. It's not about forcing a solution. The defined head center is a source of ideas and inspiration. So it's like you are plugged into the universe, source, divinity, whatever you want to call it, and you just have this constant stream of ideas and inspiration coming to you. As it's a defined center, it means that you radiate this energy. So you are constantly radiating out your ideas and inspiration. It's really important to remember for everybody, but especially when you have this defined, that you are not meant to act on every single idea that you have. It would literally be impossible. So use your strategy and authority to get to know which idea is the right one for you and when or how to take action on it. You generally have a sort of fixed way of receiving ideas and inspiration, and the ideas and inspiration that you have are yours. As the head is a pressure center, when it is open or undefined, you are likely to be under pressure to figure things out. Now, like I mentioned, the head is a center for ideas and inspiration, so it's not about figuring things out, although when you do have the center open, there is a big theme of feeling the need to like have the answer and figure it out. So your head is not about figuring things out. Did I say that enough times yet? It really is about engaging with possibility, engaging with the universe, asking questions. It's not about forcing answers. So allow yourself to kind of play with that and release yourself from the pressure of having to know the answer, because answers don't come from the head. I used to work in a restaurant, and I would notice that some days everyone would order one specific dish, and then like another day it would be a different dish, and it had no correlation to the weather or specials or anything like that. And I swear to you, it was someone that worked there that had the defined center. So it's like they're thinking of this one dish and they're like radiating it out. And people come in that have the open centers, because most people do have this open, and you know, they come in thinking like, oh, I really want the sushi, and they get there and they're like, ooh, the dip sounds really good, even though it's not their idea. So it's something to be mindful of when you do have this open. Pay attention to what actually is your idea, what you've wanted, and maybe if you get into a different environment or you're around someone else, does your idea or what you want shift? I think a great kind of game or activity for the head center is the what is up game. And what I mean by what is up, instead of like, what if this goes wrong, or what if this doesn't happen? You know, it's about engaging in possibility. So it's like, what if whatever like this amazing thing was that happened? Like, what if Beyonce came and knocked on your door? What if someone just gave you $1 million? What if, you know, whatever. But it's like kind of climbing up about like amazing things that could happen. Or another way to play this is like, wouldn't it be cool if I'm about to move right now. So for me, it's like, wouldn't it be cool if I had the most amazing apartment to move into and all of my furniture got delivered on time and I had the best neighbors, and you know, instead of using this to figure things out, engage in possibility, and when possible, you know, make it positive, make it fun, make it something that you want to happen in your life. The second center is the mind, or the ajna. It is an awareness center. And the mind is a center for concrete thinking, data processing, and analysis, not decision making. It's where we hold our belief systems and information, and again, most people have this open or undefined. If you have a defined mind or ajna, it is a place that information goes in and it's like it just stays there forever. Sometimes it's sort of like unnecessary data that you wish you could declutter, but it just sticks. You generally have a fairly fixed way of thinking and way of viewing the world. I like to think of it like you have a pair of like sunglasses or like a filter or something that filters everything through your specific way of seeing it. And it's not a bad thing. You have a sense of certainty that a lot of people in the world don't have. So that's great. And it also can be helpful for you to ask for the views and perspectives of other people around you from time to time, because you're generally not one to naturally seek that out. The world is the way that it is to you, and that's just how you see things. The open mind, or ajna, struggles for certainty. It tries to hold on to fixed ideas, beliefs, images, all of those things, but it has a hard time doing that. It is really here to be wise about ideas and perspectives and understanding different ways of seeing things, but it is not meant for certainty. So this is a really important thing to learn if you have an open mind, is that you need to let go of your need for certainty, because it's just not going to happen. So if you have, you know, a project you want to work on or a promotion or whatever, but you're waiting until you're certain about something, or certain that something's going to work out, or certain that you know enough, or certain that you have all the right facts, data, whatever, you're just not going to ever have that. So it's important to just continue to take action using your strategy and authority anyways, without the certainty. This was a really big aha for me in my own life for so many reasons. So when I grew up, my dad and my brother, they both have this area defined, and like they know what they know, what they know. They are so certain, and they are very good at debating or arguing their points. And, you know, I would learn something new and I would be all excited and like go and share it with them. And they're like, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And it's just like, oh, I don't have that kind of detailed analytical thinking to process something into my own worldview. I can really get into so many different ways of thinking about things. And so for a really long time, I thought I was stupid. And I don't think that anymore, but I do know that I'm not going to have the same certainty that they have, and that's okay. I don't need to be opinionated. I don't need to have strong opinions about things, and I actually have a gift of seeing things from many perspectives and being able to understand different types of people and different ways of seeing things, as do you if you have this open. I also like the example here of Albert Einstein. I believe he had an open ajna from what I've looked up on his chart. That's what it says. And he had this quote, I can't remember it exactly, but essentially he didn't ever remember anything that he didn't need to. So it's like he wouldn't remember anyone's phone number because he could look it up. So why keep that in his head? So if you have this center open and you find that you need to constantly reference things, that's okay. You don't need to like clutter it up or like try to hold on to things that you can reference. Keep the things that you need to keep and reference the things that you need to reference, but don't worry if you don't have the kind of like same information that sticks in your head like other people might. The throat. This is your center for manifestation. It's also the center for communication. And the idea really being that words have the power to manifest. So communication and manifestation go hand in hand. There's also sort of like a gearbox here that helps us to regulate our energy. And there really is potential here for burnout, especially if you're pushing and not following your strategy and authority. Remember that manifestors are the ones that are here to initiate, and everyone else is here to respond or wait for an invitation or wait to be initiated. If you're pushing when you're meant to be waiting or responding, you can burn out really quickly. And vice versa, if you're a manifestor and you're meant to be initiating but you're waiting, that can also burn you out. When you have a defined throat, you are here to speak. That being said, like with everything in human design, it is really important for you to use your strategy and authority to know when to speak about the right things, when to speak, who to speak to, all those things to ensure that your message is heard. I'm sure everyone has had the experience of being really excited and wanting to share something and just kind of like getting it out, and people are like, okay. And it sort of sucks, right? Because you had this thing that you really wanted to share and it doesn't land. So whether you have a defined throat or not, using your strategy and authority is really important in terms of people hearing you and valuing you. Generally, those with a defined throat have a fairly consistent way of communicating. And it will also depend on what centers their throat is connected to. So for example, if your throat center is connected to your emotional solar plexus, you're really here to talk about your feelings. If your throat is connected to your ajna or your mind, you're here to talk about your thoughts or what you're thinking. If it's connected to the G center, you're here to talk about like your identity, who you are. I would also add in, if you're gonna go to like further on in human design, to check out what gates are in your Mercury sign. I'll be making more videos about that in the future, but that's also really a part of your message and what you're here to speak about. The undefined throat. You are here to be wise about communication and action or manifestation, and you can also really amplify the energy. The undefined throat is meant for silence until it's recognized. So again, with the example of your voice kind of falling on deaf ears, it's going to be heard so much better and so much more clearly when people are asking you for your message or asking you to speak, or you're following your strategy and authority. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have a regular conversation or, those kinds of things, but when you're trying to share things that are really important or big ideas, it's better not to just sort of like blurt it out, but to allow for the right timing and for your strategy and authority to let you know that it's the right time to share something. There can be a theme with the open throat of doing inappropriate things to get attention, because the fear of the open throat is that you won't be seen or recognized and that you're invisible. And although it might seem counterintuitive, you'll likely be seen and heard, like I said, by keeping quiet. And I want to be careful because I don't want to try and silence anyone or tell someone that you can't speak. This is all just an experiment, right? I say it probably in every video. This is an experiment. So if you have the experience that you're not being heard, try it and see what happens if you are a little bit more reserved what you share and you wait to share until your feedback or your idea is invited. The open throat can often be something that's actually a little bit painful for people to have if they don't understand how they're configured, because once you learn how to use your open throat properly, it's just a lot easier to communicate and to have people hear you, versus if you're constantly trying to share a message and no one is really getting it, or they're confused by you, it's not landing, they don't see your brilliance. Try working with your strategy and authority and see if that shifts things for you. The G center, or the self center. This is your center for identity, love, and direction. In human design, this is also where your magnetic monopole lives. So it's literally your magnet that attracts everything in your life to you. I'm pretty obsessed with this center. I might be making a program about it in the future to help you magnetize yourself, or make yourself more magnetic, I guess is a better way of putting it. So if you're interested, let me know. I do have that in the works, but I'm not entirely sure when it's going to be out. The G center is an identity center. In my experience, people with a defined G center are less likely to seek out things like human design, personality assessments, ways to get to know themselves, because they know who they are. Now, there's a lot more to human design than just knowing who you are. It's really understanding how you operate, and it goes so deep into so many areas. So there's definitely is a lot of value whether you have the G center defined or not, but they're not ones that are trying to find themselves. They know who they are, they've been this way, they've generally had a pretty strong sense of identity their entire lives. When you have an open identity center, these are people who often think that they're empathic, but they're actually not feeling other people's feelings, they're feeling other people's identities. Remember, when you have an open center, you take things in and amplify it. So if you have an open G and you're around someone with a defined G, you can actually experience their identity. I find this kind of turns to be funny in some ways. You can often take on people's accents if you're around people with an accent, or ways of talking or phrases that they say. I used to be so embarrassed about this when I was a kid, because I would just start saying things like other people said them, and it was like, oh my god, like you're being like so weird, stop doing that. But now I can see, I'm like, oh, this is just the Open G Center. So it's like when I spend time with someone who has a really strong personality, it's easy for me to pick up rather on ways that they speak. I often find it's important to be mindful about who you're spending time with because like I said, you are literally taking on their identity. And I find this to actually be true even for TV shows and books. You know, if you really get into a book that has strong characters or a TV show that has strong characters, it can be kind of easy to take on their identities. And usually things are, you know, a little bit more on the dramatic side because we want them to be entertaining. So again, be mindful about what identities you're consuming and taking on. The undefined Gs want to find themselves, but there really is no self to find. You have a fluid sense of identity, and that's totally beautiful. There can be a theme of questioning your lovability, your purpose, your direction. But again, you're here to be fluid, and it's all about just taking the next right step for you, following your strategy and authority and letting things unfold. My friend told me this story about this really cool person who I believe started off making jewelry, just like as a random hobby. And because she designed jewelry, she learned how to draw so she could like, you know, sketch out what she was gonna make. And then from there, she got into, I think it was textiles. And then from there became a like incredible wallpaper designer. And I mean, there's a similar theme there in terms of like art, but the idea being that she couldn't have started off knowing that she was going to be an incredible wallpaper designer, right? She just kept following the next thing that felt good, that felt good, that felt good, that felt good, and landed her doing something that she really loved. And so I like to think it's similar. It's not necessarily about knowing what is 20 steps ahead or what the end goal is, but it's about doing the next thing that's going to feel good for you. In terms of relationships in the Open G, there are a few things that are important. Like I said, you can take on people's identities, so be careful about that, or mindful rather. And also you are able to see the potential in people, which is really incredible, especially if you're in some sort of a position to mentor people or coach people, because you can really hold space for them to be the most amazing version of who they are. But when you're in relationships with people, whether it's romantic or otherwise, you want to be in a relationship with who they are now and not who you think they might be. So that can kind of create a little bit of like sketchy relationships if you're like, oh, but he's gonna be so amazing one day. Maybe make sure you're aware that you're in the relationship with the person they are now and not the person that you hope that they could be one day if they lived up to like their true potential. Geography is also really important to undefined or open Gs. So having your physical environment and your surroundings feel good to you, whether it's where you live in terms of your country, your city, your house, your apartment, whatever it is, having surroundings that feel good are really important for you. And I'll leave you with a reminder that just focus on the next step, right? Focus on the things that feel good to you, that align with your strategy and your authority, and the next right things will continue to come. Okay, this is turning out to be a very long video, so I'm gonna break it into 2 videos. Make sure you head to sortofspiritual.com/centers to get a free guide I made for you so you can easily reference what I've just shared in both part 1 and 2 of the videos. So if you've learned something so far, I would love for you to subscribe, click the bell to get notified, and you'll see when the part 2 is up.